Hello wonderful people, Connor Whitmore here again with another video for you on the Nawtystep channel, and today I'm going to be analysing Excision's 6 albums and ordering them from worst to best. Excision, in the bass game for over 15 years, modern dubstep godfather, founder of Lost Lands Festival, owner of Subsidia Records and before that Rotten Recordings, and of course writer of 6 albums. Which isn't a record, there are definitely many other bass musicians who have written more albums than him, but if we're talking about having a good range quality-wise, which of course works well for this particular video concept, then I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a better artist to talk about than Excision. Because there have been both mighty highs and mighty lows, not in equal measure. I think the good does outweigh the bad when it comes to his albums, but the lows are there, they're definitely there. And on that note, starting with the worst and going towards the best, as we want this video to be more positive as it goes on, just for it to be a nicer experience overall, we have what is for many who follow this channel at least, the undisputed worst Excision album, I think it would be fair to say. His most recently released, January last year, and which for me it just has to place here. There's no other choice for it than Onyx. With headbanging so entrenched in the modern dubstep scene at the moment, heaviness and loudness ruling over all else when it comes to music making has been of prime importance to many producers. Meaning that we've reached a bit of a point in the last few years where, because of that emphasis on loud and heavy, ambitious melodic use and the creative drops that might follow that has suffered somewhat as an approach. Resultantly, a lot of the music's become stale, one-dimensional, bereft of personality, almost loud and heavy for the sake of it, and Onyx is absolutely the poster album for that. This thing is absolutely chock full of one-note, directionless, formulaic material that becomes more and more mind-numbing as the album goes on. Even when you get tracks like Our Fire that initially show a little bit of promise with the melody and the vocal, he still finds himself gravitating towards that mindless heaviness as if it's some kind of industry-scale magnet that he can't rip himself away from. And there are so many tracks here, 17, and it just keeps going on and on and on, doing the same things over and over again. I mean, there are a couple of breathers here and there, but mostly it is just an onslaught of that mindless blah blah blah, hitting my head against a brick wall kind of heaviness. Osiris is okay. I think listening back to the album for this video, it sounds like a little bit of a Yuki tribute, weirdly enough. And there are sweet lighter moments here and there that I kind of touched on just now, but beyond that, I really can't find much, if anything, to write home about here. Basically, I haven't really got a reason to go back to any of these tracks individually because they all sound exactly like each other in their main moments. There's nowhere near enough singling them out. Far from his best production overall as well, by the way. He will drop another album at some point soon, and one can only hope it's a step forward from this as his most recent LP, because yeah, Onyx, sorry Jeff, but you are way better than this, and this collection, it just ain't it. But it absolutely gets better from here as we move forward, and next up we have the longest Excision album, coming in at 16 tracks and 1 hour 5 minutes long. October 2016 release, that is Virus. Which doesn't have that many start to finish great tracks, but my god, there are some sick drops here. Genuinely some of his best ever are on this album for sure. Second drop of Virus, first drop of Neck Brace, first drop of Generation, first drop of G-Shit, both drops of The Paradox, and the drops in Mirror for a bit of variety as well. Virus, I think, is what Onyx wishes it was, basically. Very heavy on dubstep and the use of that particular genre, without that much variety on show, but with a lot better ideas and production across the stretch of it. We get a lot of very memorable vocal features and samples here. You know, I'd actually say that most of these tracks have a very distinct vocal aspect to them. Some fantastic lengthy introductions as well, giving the LP a bit of an epic feel, like Virus, the opener and title track, or The Paradox, or Generator. Also a really interesting LP in that it shows quite a shift, I think, from X into more landscapey, drawn-out kinds of bass music. More melodic influence lobbed in there as well, with tracks like Drowning and With You, which we hadn't seen that much from him before. It just doesn't have the same level of character as the ones in front of it, not quite as dynamic or diverse overall stylistically or mood-wise. Very banger-centric, without that much awareness of being an album overall. You know, like I said, it has good ideas, but it is a bit bloated whilst delivering the same kind of energy again and again and again. Absolutely a mark-up on Onyx, massively so, but not one that I go back to all that much, because with that much in-your-face heaviness going on, my head just kind of hurts by the time I've gotten to the end of it. Following that, we have an album that for me has the diversity and the variety that the two before it that I've just mentioned don't quite have, and which has grown on me a decent amount over time. An August 2018 release, Apex. Yeah, this album is good without being great or anything close, pretty much by virtue of having that variety that I just talked about. Peaks and troughs stylistically to guide you through as opposed to the same kinds of energy again and again. There is very straightforward material here, like I've never quite understood the hype for a track like One on One, for example, where the drops do absolutely nothing given who's involved there. Tracks as well like Power and Fall and Where You Are that don't really add anything of note to the album and feel a bit superfluous, and which I think could have been cut completely. But what elevates Apex in a big way for me beyond the variety that we get are the vocals, a lot of which are some of his most memorable and iconic ever. Sullivan King on Wake Up, or Shallows on Gold with Illenium, or Messinian on Hoods Up, for example. Or the main samples on Tonight and Home, or the whole introduction of Volt, if we want to go down that route. Apex I find to be more digestible as an album overall as well, going through it start to finish. Pretty much the same length as Onyx, but just 14 tracks here, so fewer concepts to kind of take in and go through, if you will. And that gives the album a bit more character as well, having fewer concepts to dive into a little bit more, as opposed to just kind of bulldozing through the same ideas over and over. The production here, to be fair, not quite as rounded off and developed generally, I wouldn't say, but conceptually the good well outweighs the not so good, and I just find it to be way more ambitious on that front than the ones I've talked about before. Apex also saw X kinda incorporating that scenic, drawn-out dubstep style that I was talking about before, previously mentioned with Virus, into his albums, into his music making a lot more, showing us new strings to his bow and whatnot. Again, just a decent listen with a collection of great moments on show without being special is how I would best sum this one up. Okay, moving on into what is, I think, the third best Excision album, and it's here that we take quite a significant shift up in quality, I think. One of the albums that played a massive role in getting me into bass music initially and in the first place. The oldest album here in this little list that we are going through, an October 2011 release, and that is X-Rated. Which I'm just going to say about it off the bat, this is a very cohesive album conceptually. Not only one of X's most cohesive albums ever, but I think one of the most cohesive bass albums of all time. Just the 10 cuts that we get here, but they all deliver a lot of character, and I'd say the vast majority of the drop ideas that we get here are fucking sick. In particular, tracks like The Underground, Oh No, Swerve, and Jaguar, which are all up there with my favourites in bass music of all time. I love the grunge and the gristle of the heaviness that we get here across the board. Really does feel like a machine just kind of chugging and bounding along. Very reflective of the time in which it was made. Great chilled moments as well. Sleepless and Jaguar do a really good job of putting that manic feel into a bit of context. Other bits of variety as well beyond that chilled stuff, like metallic grungy house or 110 BPM leaning stuff to give it a bit of bounce. It just needed better production overall if it was going to place higher here. I mean, it's very of its time in that way, which is great. That gives it a very authentic feel, very much roots it in that era. But the flip side of that is that it can feel a little bit dated at points, especially when you're hearing it today with the advancements we've made in production and technology and whatnot. And when you're talking about a list like this and you're getting into like top 2, top 3, these are the kind of things that make the difference. Because when we're talking about whether I prefer to hear this or the two in front that I'm about to talk about, it's the two in front that I go to 9 times out of 10 because they just sound a lot better and a lot more refined on the ear. Also got a couple of features from You Know Who on this LP, which leaves a little bit of a sour taste, not gonna lie. Really good album, a lot going for it, some of my favourite tracks ever, and a classic, but not quite at the level of the top 2 for me. And on that note, taking second place in my eyes, Excision's second best album. I talked about X-Rated being one of the most cohesive bass albums of all time, but this album levels up on that even further in my opinion. Gonna stick my neck out and say that. That is absolutely what I think and feel. A February 2015 release, that is Codename X. When you get to this point in a worst to best list, it is about the ratio of good to bad tracks. And put simply, pretty much every cut on this LP is very good ideas-wise in some way. Not only that, but factoring in variety and production value along with most of the drop ideas being great, like I said, and you've got a very enjoyable listening experience overall. What Virus is for Onyx, going for a similar kind of thing but being a better version of that, I think Codename X is for X-Rated. Like X-Rated, Codename X has that shorter, more cohesive approach with fantastic ideas on display, but the collection overall just has a way more refined feel to it and is a lot better on the ear. It contains my favourite X track ever in Livewire. I also love the opener and title tune, Codename X. I also love X Up, Push It Up, Night Shine. These are all elite bass tracks. Interstellar is a gorgeous track as well, and one of his most underrated, and also one of the best endings to a bass album ever. Even the ones I haven't mentioned already have something distinctly memorable about them. You know, maybe not quite on the level of the ones I've mentioned in full here, but each track does provide its own dose of personality and character to the album. There are moments here and there that aren't quite as captivating as the very best stuff, but there isn't really a dud track here on this LP as a kind of track overall. Not really a bad track, which is quite something for a bass album. And there isn't that much to say about it beyond that. Executed really efficiently, runs really well as an LP generally, and absolutely worth a second spot here. For sure. And you might be sat there thinking, well, how can it get better than that, given what you just said about Codename X? Well, perhaps by putting a band together and having even more minds on board to create something even more star-studded than those that I've just mentioned. To my mind, probably in the top 5 bass albums of all time, or at least very close. Excision teaming up with Downlink and KJ Sorka as Destroyed with the Invasion LP. Now, strictly speaking, I think the Invasion and Codename X are pretty comparable quality-wise. I mean, the Invasion probably just about edges it with the ratio of great tracks it has comparatively, but it is close. The thing that separates the Invasion out for me is the context surrounding it, and the fact that, for one, what we have here essentially is a band, which you don't get a lot of in bass music at all, and which personally I would add Space Lasers to as such an integral part of it, a fourth member, if you will. I've talked a lot in the past on this channel about collaboration, and having more minds on creating something in principle sounds like a pretty good idea, but you have to remember that every little touch here, every little detail with the music and beyond has to be decided on by multiple people. It ain't easy at all, let me promise you that, and to have created something this compelling given that fact is quite a feat. It's the world building with this album that perhaps isn't quite as available in others we've talked about already before. Excision's, I suppose, dystopia or outer-worldly madness being painted here most effectively through vocal sampling, through sound usage, again, mad variety with the genre to create that story and embellish it, and also everything that came with it visually, like the Alien vs Predator costumes and the electronic pad kind of instruments, the whole live aspect to it. And to be fair, you might be sat there thinking, well, what does that have to do with the music itself? Well, as soon as all of that stuff came out visually, the picture became clearer in the mind of the listener. It could be paired with the music in a more effective way. The world they were trying to create kind of crystallized, and everything tied up together so well. Just insanely cool when you think about everything this project had bound up in it. But even without that, the music for me already does an amazing job of plunging you into that world, putting you directly in that environment, and you can't help but think that when that happens, the musicians involved have done a very, very good job. With again, some of the most striking bass tracks of the 2010s, from Raise Your Fist to Crusaders to Activation to Bounce to Annihilate to Funk Hole, with an intense energy start to finish, but the right amount of variety from track to track, and not too many of them as well. Just 10 cuts here and under 45 minutes, so yeah, very digestible. A project driven and orchestrated by Excision, and yeah, it was incredible when it came out. It still is today, and it's absolutely, in my eyes, the best album that he has been involved in. The Invasion by Destroyed is elite. But there we have it, guys. Excision albums, worst to best. Thank you very much for tuning in and watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And on that note, if you did enjoy it, please do like the video and subscribe if you're yet to. It takes 2 seconds to do if you haven't done it already. Would massively appreciate it. If you like bass music coverage, EDM coverage, electronic music coverage overall, then you're going to enjoy the content on this channel quite a bit. So yeah, please do it. It takes a couple of seconds. Would massively appreciate. And after that, I want to hear from all of you guys in the comment section down below. What does your worst to best Excision albums list look like? Is it similar to mine, practically the same, or completely different? Does it completely tear mine to shreds and whatnot? Drop your lists with all your thoughts in the comment section down below. Also, my Patreon is linked below in the description box down below if you want to load more exclusive or extra bonus content beyond what we do here on the channel every month for a small fee. Helps keep the channel going as well. So yeah, all good stuff bound up in that. But yeah, beyond that, thank you again very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one, whatever that might be. Keep it naughty until then. Peace.